Hey everyone, welcome to AvePoint's webinar today. We're going to be talking about backup and recovery for Office 365. And it's going to be a really good session today. We've got three panelists for you today. So my name is John Hodges. I'm a VP of Product Strategy here at AvePoint. I've been in the industry since, I would say 2001 in helping customers work with SharePoint. And most recently at AvePoint, working for the last 10 years around backup and recovery strategies and helping to transition customers who have been traditionally in the SharePoint world up into Office 365. So with me, I got two great panelists here. Yatindra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks very much, John. My name is Yatindra Ranpura. I work as a TSP at AvePoint, and I've been working with SharePoint for more than 10 years now, looking at different aspects, but mainly specializing in governance and compliance matters that we deal with our clients. So yeah, excited to find out more about cloud backup and to take you through scenarios.
Yep. Yeah, Mark, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, my name is Mark Nagie. I've been doing backup and recovery, disaster recovery, and several things in my life, almost 30 years worth. Obviously, a little longer than most of you gentlemen, but yeah, SharePoint has been around with us for about maybe 5 years, or actually no, about 7 or 8 years, and obviously the cloud backup has been a very big thing in our briefcase, I guess, if you want to say that has been a stickler point for us for a long time, and obviously we've gotten a decent system going at this point.
Yeah, and I definitely want to thank Mark for being here today because part of the challenge as a vendor is when we're presenting to you guys about what Microsoft does for Office 365 and what we can do to help, a lot of times we have vendor speak. Right, we talk about our advantages and we talk about why we do what we do without a lot of in-context work here. So Mark is really here to help us offer a lot of ground level. What does it look like to actually deploy this at a company? What have been some of the business drivers that led to why the solution's there? And then also what it was like to transition from a company that was traditionally an on-prem backup story into something that was now fully hosted. So in terms of the agenda today, you guys are going to hear a few slides that talk a little bit about the industry and why we actually think there's a place for backup in a world of SaaS products. And then we're also going to hear from Mark a little bit about how he ended up going through his decision-making criteria. How did he end up coming to the idea that he needed a solution for Office 365? Yatindra is also going to give you guys a hands-on demo that showcases what cloud backup really looks like. And how we can run this in your environment. So with that, I'll get us started, and then we'll be free to take questions as we go. So if you do have any questions, we are monitoring the chat window. So if you paste them in there, our moderators are going to be sending them our way. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get to your question right away, but we do have time at the end to make sure that everything does get addressed. Okay. So one of the common questions that we get from our customers is why we actually thought it was necessary to even build or look at a backup and recovery solution for SaaS platform. Part of the thing that we hear from most of our customers is, well, shouldn't Microsoft already be handling this? And so when we look at the core problem that we're trying to solve, at the heart of it, we know that data is the new oil for companies. Data is super valuable. And what we're trying to do is make sure that any type of scenario where data loss could be happening is well covered and well protected in your environment. So in our case, what we're doing is we're looking at what that cost to a business is of not having a solution to be able to recover from downtime or to recover from any outages. And so what we've seen from many studies is that anytime we talk about data loss, it could just be an interruption of service, or it could be a corruption of data or ransomware. We find that per record, typically you're looking at $200 to $400 per record lost in terms of a cost to a business. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent those types of things from happening so that we help make sure that your insurance policy for that SaaS platform is well governed. And so when we talk about who's actually responsible for preventing that type of loss, there's two ways you could think of it. You could say, well, this is the responsibility of Microsoft to say that they're here to offer you Office 365. They should also be the ones that are there to protect the information that you're storing there. And so what we find is that, yes, Microsoft is absolutely responsible. They are responsible for the loss of a service or the uptime of the service in the event of network outages or disruptions. They're there to help prevent from natural disasters. So for instance, if we have a wonderful blizzard like we do out here in New York today, that happens to take down a data center, Microsoft is absolutely the one responsible for making sure that there's additional data centers or availability that they can fail over to. So they're responsible for disaster recovery. They also provide some short-term capabilities where they're here to prevent from just basic user error pieces. So if you had an issue where you had lost or corrupted a single version of a document, or you had inadvertently deleted something, Microsoft is there to help make those short-term mistakes something that can be easily recovered from. So a really good example of where this comes into play, they have something called a soft delete for a mailbox. So in the event that you do remove somebody's mailbox or you do remove a user from the company, you do have a short window in which you can go and retrieve that user's information and be able to put it back in place. So from Microsoft's perspective, they're here to cover you from those types of mistakes, either the big things that you cannot control, like a disaster recovery, or the very small short-term mistakes that we need to be able to roll back from. What we typically hear from our customers is that there's a few other things that the IT teams are responsible for that need to get covered as well. So for instance, if you have deactivated a user inside of Office 365 and their mailboxes and OneDrive information are automatically purged, what do we do if we actually needed to get that back, especially if they were part of a litigation that happened later on in the year? This has actually happened quite a few times to our customers where they might have removed somebody from Exchange, but then what they find out is they actually needed that mailbox or some of the mail content in a litigation that happened 6 to 9 months later. So what do we do about making sure that that happens? When that happens, we have the ability to restore that information. The other thing that we find that the responsibility kind of starts falling back onto the customer for is, well, what happens if you let someone actually do something bad with Office 365? So examples of this could be you have ransomware or other type of malicious code that can go in and potentially encrypt or protect information with keys that you don't have. There are times where you have malicious employees or insiders who might be going in to use what looks like authorized credentials to either permanently delete or remove or corrupt information inside of the company. So what do we do about those scenarios and how do we roll back that content? And then we also have to look about what happens if the Office 365 service is down or our access is prevented for any length of time. So how do we actually get that information back? Or what do we do if there were accidental deletions, but we didn't realize it right away? So information that we needed and removed, but that has been past that 90-day window that Microsoft looks at. So the easiest way to really think about this is when it comes down to protecting your data, that's something that you as a customer are responsible for. But when it comes down to protecting the system and the service, that's something that Microsoft is responsible for. So I kind of want to open this up now to Mark to be able to provide some insights. When you were doing your evaluation of Office 365, what were some of the drivers that led you to want to even bring on a third-party backup solution beyond what Microsoft has?
Well, we've always had a problem with DR and besides obviously doing the restores that were done on a I'd say daily basis, but at least a weekly basis. The problem you have with any backup or restore is you have to have also an offsite copy of it, and
Mm-hmm.
the biggest issue we have is we're still old school and we use tapes, and we do have stuff that's saved offsite, but by getting a I'll say an offsite backup, we obviously were prepared a little better if there's some issue that we have here, or if there is I'll say a disaster in with the system. I mean, obviously we're using Office 365, where as you said, Microsoft in a sense has a plan for you, but you never know if we have to then host it somewhere else, and I have a problem with my tapes or tapes don't get to where they're supposed to go quickly enough, then we're in deep water.
Yeah. Yeah, and you actually mentioned something interesting. So even in your history of supporting, collaboration platforms, you were saying about weekly recovery from end user requests. What do those typically look like?
Well, I mean, most of them are people just going, "Oh, I just deleted something," or and there are times where people, even with the history turned on, still have a problem. Something's missing, and it's from a month ago, and a lot of times people are mistakenly move things, so things disappear, so your history goes with it. Yeah, so we tend to have, it may not be on always a weekly basis because obviously we have other things besides SharePoint, but things like SharePoint and who really it's just a file server um, that looks pretty. But other than that, you do the same type of restores all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the other scenarios we've heard from our customers too is even just simple things like I didn't necessarily corrupt the document as much as I corrupted the permissions around that document. So I had unique permissions that were then accidentally inherited. And so we've heard those scenarios too of needing to be rolled back as well.
Yeah, especially in SharePoint. SharePoint is because you allow people to control their site, within your global site. People tend to just turn security off, or things just change, and all of a sudden you can't get to the site at all. And the only way to get it back, besides manually putting it back, would be to recover it or restore it.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's actually take a look at some of those options that Microsoft has here. So when we look at what that type of recovery looks like, what Mark is referring to is in the event that you did delete a mailbox, or in the event that you need to recover something like a SharePoint site or a site collection, there actually are options to roll back that site collection natively with Microsoft. They do keep backups for you twice a day, retained for 14 days. But to Mark's point, these are user requests of someone making a mistake, not a mistake with the entirety of that site collection. And so that native recovery looks pretty dramatic in terms of having to roll back all of the work that had been happening in that site collection back to a previous point in time. So that's actually kind of something consistent where if we even take a look at some of the newer features that Microsoft is offering here, we know that user error is common in Office 365. So for instance, you've got your version history where if you made a mistake, you could go back to look at that. That works really well if version history has been turned on. We had a policy for a while where version history was off by default. And so what that looked like was your changes are likely sitting in the first and second stage recycle bin as empty. So Microsoft actually does have a new files-based restore for OneDrive, which is a fairly comprehensive look at how we get content back. But just to give you guys an idea of what it looks like to interact with it, so if you were using this is my own personal OneDrive that I was working with. You could see the history of our cloud backup webinar slides as we were updating them. If you go into the settings, you'll see the ability to roll back that OneDrive. But you can see the language here, even though it's being marketed as a restore files, if you really read into this, you're restoring your OneDrive. So if you look and pick any time within the last 30 days, you can play back the changes for any of the content in the last 30 days. But the key is all changes up to that restore point are going to be rolled back. So this isn't a file restore. This isn't me rolling back a single version of a file. You are taking that all or nothing approach to roll back the entirety of that OneDrive. So it's using something very similar to what we see with the site collection recovery there as well. So yeah, what Mark was talking about is definitely one of the things that we see a lot of from customers who have tried to use the native restore capabilities is you get a very all or nothing approach. So what Yatindra is going to show you guys as we go through this is the ability to take this middle piece here of what we see our customers typically wanting to go after here of ease of restore and the ability to just restore granular content or little mistakes like permissions and security without having to roll back the entirety of an Office 365 site collection or mailbox or OneDrive. So what we're trying to do is help give tools that can be more precise. So this is just to recap some of the concerns we've had so far. But if if you didn't identify with some of the issues that we've talked about with Mark here, or if you didn't identify really with the end user requests for recovery, you have to understand that there are plenty of other reasons to approach owning your own data. One of the big ones that Mark hinted at was keeping on-site backups and information outside of the Office 365 cloud. Because you have to keep in mind, this is your data and this is something that you need to own. So we've heard this quite often where customers need to have their own data stored in their own data centers. So our goal here is to really give you the tools to help provide these types of solutions to you. So the way we provide these solutions to you is we have a fully hosted product called AvePoint Cloud Backup. And we're going to give you guys a preview of what that actually looks like. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about what we do and how we actually built our hosted version of this product. So the first thing is this is a fully hosted cloud backup product that is stored on Microsoft Azure. And so we are in the same Microsoft data centers, getting the best performance we possibly can with Office 365. Meaning we're able to drive backups of up to 4 times a day for the entire Office 365 stack. So what that means is that we're going after Dynamics 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, Groups, SharePoint sites, and as much as possible the other new services that Microsoft has been offering as well. And so our goal here is really to go as broad as possible in terms of covering what's there in Office 365. The other piece that we do is we might protect very broadly in Office 365 and try and make it as easy as possible to do that setup, but we make the restores very simple, and we're going to show you guys a couple of scenarios of how that works. Goal here is to really be led with search first. So if you lost something, we can easily search back through all of the content that we have, but then to be able to restore it very simply in terms of being able to get a mailbox or just a document or a document version rolled back into Office 365. And then the other thing too that's really important that's kind of lead us into how you should be looking at these types of cloud backup vendors out there is around the visibility that we offer for protecting that data in Office 365. So from our perspective, we know that it's very important where even if you are using a SaaS product to be able to maintain visibility, a complete audit history, and a record of every time your Office 365 environment was touched, every backup that was successful, and every document that we have a copy of in that cloud backup service. So, you know, Mark, we'd talked about this a little bit before while we were, you know, going through the sales process here. You've actually not been a stranger to running your own backup servers and being able to run your own backup service on-prem, correct? Have you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
I mean, with SharePoint, including everything else, because we also have Unix and VMware and many other Microsoft Windows servers, and yeah, we've done our own backup system. We obviously have some other systems as well besides AvePoint, but we at this point, you know, the trials and tribulations of supporting your own system, backup's not working or tape's not going out, or, you know, and even like today, we're not in our office, I can't send my tapes off site. So there's a lot of things that come into play when you do or house your own system, that you know, good and the bad, I guess, but in this case a lot of times there's some bad involved.
And one of the pieces that we've heard often is, you know, you are responsible for the scale out as well. So if Office 365 is as popular as it is in your organization as most others, you'd be responsible for handling any of the scale out in terms of the number of servers or bandwidth required to hit your SLAs currently.
Yeah, and in our case, a lot of times you will have situations where growth has, you know, escalated significantly, and a lot of times you can't just put another drive in, you know, automatically, or make a change that quickly, or whatever it is. And obviously cloud backup gives you that flexibility that I don't see here, you know, locally.
Yeah, and so when we talk about providing this to our customers, our goal is to make all that abstract, the scale out, the throughput, the storage, and all of that. We try and make it as transparent as possible, because we understand that, if you had a migration to Office 365 one day, that's going to put a huge load on your service to get that next backup done. But ultimately, that's not a permanent capital expenditure you want to make, right? That's something that's a very temporary burst, which we have the flexibility to do as a software vendor there. So when you were looking at using a fully hosted version, what concerns did you have around giving up control? Because obviously there is some amount of ownership that you do end up handing over to a third-party hosting vendor.
I mean, there's one big one, which is security, and whether or not your backups are in a place where someone can, I'll say, not see. Obviously being encrypted, and also a lot of times being the old timer. We always are used to handing things. I literally can hold the tape in my hand, or I can literally touch the storage. And as crazy as that sounds, it's that comfort zone that you have a lot of times that seem to make everything, I guess, go a little smoother. But obviously things change, performance changes. There's so many options that we have to go with the flow, as they say, just to keep things. And you got to be flexible. And in my case, it's very hard to be flexible with everything being local, everything being physically there. It's some simple things as power, from storage size to servers. Performance is a big problem that you would have anytime you do backups locally. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the big things that we face all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have tried to bridge that gap a little bit too in some of the recent releases that we did, because part of the challenge we've had is making customers feel comfortable with the idea of giving up some control. So there are two key areas where we let customers still bring part of their infrastructure. So one of the areas is, if you choose, you can bring your own storage. Obviously we provide by default as much Azure storage as needed to protect your account. But you can choose to bring your own storage, including FTP that connects back on-prem. And you can also choose to bring and hold your own encryption keys. Now, by default, we encrypt everything with unique keys for every single tenant. But many of our enterprises have opted to actually use Azure Key Vault and hold their own keys. So at this point, there is no way that anyone could ever access that information outside of your organization. So in terms of deploying the solution there, how long did it actually take you to get up to speed in terms of deploying the cloud backup solution?
It was actually very quick. I mean, besides putting in the money to pay for it, that's probably the longer part. Within days, we were, not even days, I would say within a day, we were already up and running. Obviously you still have to test things out and make sure things are working, but you guys provided pretty much all the setup, the schedules, besides me telling you that this is what we wanted backed up. It was very smooth, I gotta say.
Yeah. So I think with that, we kind of want to give some time to Yatindra to be able to showcase that and to be able to show you guys what that setup looks like. And then Yatindra, you and Mark can talk about how that works.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pass the presenter rights over to you.
Cool, excellent. Thanks very much, guys. I'm going to start by showing my screen. You should be able to see AvePoint Online Services. Let me know when you can see it, and I'll start talking. Hide that.
Yep. Looks good.
So far, we can see it. Thanks.
Cool, perfect. Okay. So this is our online platform, as John mentioned briefly. We have a host of different products out there that address governance, compliance, and backup is the main thing we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to click on Cloud Backup for Office 365. As we mentioned, I think the evolution of this has made it a single pane of glass. And so what you can see in front of you is the whole of the Office 365 suite that we cover. That includes Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, as well as Office 365 Groups, Project Online, public folders, and recently added is Dynamics 365. Which is a separate entity because it deals with a Dynamics tenant and backup of that. So I think in terms of setting up, the way this works is we would need access to your tenant in terms of connecting to it and then performing the backups. Once they are connected, then you'll see a green shield next to it. And the great thing about this is you can, if you're recently just taking the journey towards Office 365, you could start with one of these and then turn on the others as you kind of grow into it. Is that what you did, Mark, in terms of how
Well,
you approach it?
luckily, we kind of just did it all at the same time, and obviously, what we
Cool.
have, Exchange Online, the OneDrive, SharePoint, as well as the Office 365, and obviously, I guess you couldn't get any simpler than that. If it failed or had a problem, you see it right up on the screen right off the bat, so it kind of is a very good indicator.
Cool, excellent, thank you. And here we can see that SharePoint Online is actually backing up as we speak. And so when we click on details, we can take a look further into it in terms of what areas. And the demonstration area I've got here, we've got actually 3 different tenants and then subsites within there. So we can get a lot of detail very quickly by going inside each one. And we can see which areas are being backed up, how far the progress has gone. And I think it's great that you can then also have a dashboard. And as John mentioned, this is set up to back up every 6 hours. So every 4 hours, every 4 times a day, every day, it will come up and it'll tell you the progression in terms of number of files it's backed up. And here we can see that it's progressing through that. And the interface is very simple for all of them. It shows you the same way. And I think it's really good for people just to realize how it's working in the background, because as you typically said back in the day, this would probably be on a tape somewhere and you'd back it up, and then restoring would be the other side of it, because obviously backing up, you're doing that, but the restore process needs to be quite flexible. And in our case here, we've got it on demand. So if I had a scenario or if I wanted to do it, I'll cover it in a second, but I'm just going to go through the backup scope and sort of give you an idea of how it's set up first, and then we'll go to the recover process. So if we change backup scope, we can drill down into particular areas, and we can see that as well as site collections, we've got the whole tenants can be selected. And this is quite dynamic, because if you've got different policies, you can arrange them through here. And also in the backup frequency, if you only wanted to do a selective, maybe once a day instead of all 4, you can choose that. But I think the restore, as I mentioned, I think that's the key in terms of if you want it easy for people to go in and recover that information. Then we offer nice options for that. So I'm going to use SharePoint Online as an example. And we're going to go in and we're going to select a file that I've got in my area. So let me find that site collection. And here there's two options available. Either some metadata, so some tagging involved with either the file name or a particular tag that you've applied to the file. So you can drill down to, say, a document level and you can recover that document. Or you can go into a specific backup job. So if you know that, say, 3 months ago, there was a particular file that you had, maybe early November, you can drill down into the actual backup job that took place, and you can go into that and then dive into it. So, for example, we've got audit library here. Let me find a good scenario. And then documents, and there's nothing there. I'm just going to do a quick search for that day.
Yep. So Yatindra, I can actually, in live here, troubleshoot this for you. You are actually only looking at the backup data for that day.
Yes. So let me go back to. Yeah, thank you. So okay, let me pick I'm gonna untick
Yep, and
that.
that checkbox right there. Perfect. Yep.
Cool. And let's pick. Let's see if.
I hate to say it, but that's happened to me many times. Forget
Yeah,
about that little box in the bottom. That's very important.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
don't forget.
there you go. So hopefully we should have something in the forms as a
Yeah.
document.
And so to give you guys an explanation as to why that's the case is the two ways we generally see people approach their restores is either I'm on a support call with someone, and they know exactly what they lost, and I'm able to type into my search what they lost, and that's kind of our default stance. We generally do a search first approach. And the second way is what Yatindra's trying to do, which is, well, what if there was a specific point in time when I could point to and drill into it? And we actually see this typically when you've got folks who are doing design changes or cosmetic changes to things like SharePoint team sites and looking to publish a change to the branding in the intranet. So what you end up with is a brand new layout that if we ever need to roll back, there's a very specific point in time we want to be rolling back to be able to select at a much higher level at the site collection level. So it just gives you that that perspective on why we made those design changes. But I will also say this. Part of the advantage of signing up with our SaaS platform is that we do monthly releases. So if there are things that you're not a huge fan of, if you look at the top right of Yatindra's screen, you're going to see a little feedback button. And if you hit that feedback button, you can actually open a ticket similar to user voice directly with our product team to let us know. And it's very likely you could see those changes reflected within 1 month to 2 months' time.
Cool, excellent.
So did I song and dance enough for you,
That was
Yatindra?
good. That was a good move.
That's a great move, yes. Perfect. So we can see an item here, such as the all items or SPSX, or a particular maybe form that may have been changed. And if we're looking to restore it, we can then click on the restore button here. And they'll give us the additional options that are available. So either we can restore just the content, so just the page there as an example, or we can restore the security around it, or both. So security would mean that if someone had, say, locked that page just to themselves and no one else can access it, we would do restore security only and then bring it back to that point in time. And if it was a complete disaster, they've written some custom code or they've modified it somehow and it's broken, then we can restore all content and security. And if it was a, say, instead of a web page, but if it was a text document or Word document, and we're not sure if it's appropriate to put it back in the original location, then you can choose to restore in another location. Now, this is really useful if you've got people that either are on holiday or they're away, and you want to map it so someone else can then access it instead of them. Then you can map a user from one place to another. So that would mean that the target person that you nominate will then have the same permissions as the originator. And what that means is if you are looking to give them access, it's very simple to do that. It just looks at Azure Active Directory, and then you literally find the person through there when we do the mapping. In terms of languages, we can cover that as well, and that covers something like from German to English or vice versa. So it allows you to map in different locations as well. So if you're a global company, that's quite useful. And also in terms of the destination object type. So if you've got, say you've got a shared area within SharePoint Online, so maybe an intranet subsite, for example, where the changes have happened and you're looking to restore, but you're not sure, then you could restore it to someone's OneDrive, which is then very seamless for the end user because they can go in and if I find my OneDrive, for example, I can restore that file, which originates in someone else's area in the DBN tenant there, and I can restore it to my OneDrive. I can check with the end user saying, are you happy with this? And then perform the restore action there. And I can either do that as an attach or I can do that as a merge. Merge meaning that I might already have a version of it there, and then I can either overwrite or replace. I can either merge or replace as it says there. So that's really powerful, and that means that people can carry on working in their normal activities while you're performing this. And so it's a really is intuitive for the admins to perform the restore process, and also very easy for them to figure things out in terms of they don't need to know the context behind particular things of where they're performing the restores from. They will know maybe the URL that they start off with, and then they can search that way. The other method that I mentioned of searching was using metadata. So if we do know that it's in my tenant, it's a document, but I've got a document name now, such as dingbat.txt, I can do a search within a particular time frame, and that will result in a list of them. Now, what you will also notice is there's numbers behind some of these, and that means that they're actually versioning that is captured. So you can then find the exact version that you've got and you're working on. So if instead of version 2, I wanted to restore version 1, I can quickly look at the URL that's also shown here, and then restore based on that. What we also have the option to do is for a small number of items, we can export. And the export functionality is really useful because what it will do is it will point in time restore that as a zip file. And in the
Sorry about that.
in the option of saving time, I've kind of screenshotted it because it does take a couple of minutes. So earlier this morning, when I was doing it, I was looking for permission slip, which did exist in a document library, and I deleted it by purpose. Then I deleted the recycle bin copy as well to make sure that it's completely gone. And then I performed a restore. Now here you can see that in the restore I've got the document name as permission underscore slip.docx, and I searched for it. And this was done in 2nd of February, so it's about a month ago. Once I'd found it, I clicked on the export button. Now we got the same message just now where it started something off in activity report. We can take a look into what it's actually doing. And it's basically said that I've started a restore job, 0% complete. It's got an ID there. And that gives us an indication of what's happening in the background. It's going in and it's actually filtering through, finding that particular file, and then pulling it back, and it's going to email that back to me as a zip file. And this is the email that I get. Whoops, moving forward. Sorry about that. So I get an email that details that this is the action that's taken place, and we've also added a password for protection on there as well, so that when I then download the zip file, I get prompted for the same password. So it makes it secure in terms of the restoration process, and also that then when I open it up, I can verify that yes, that is the file that I was after. So it's a very seamless process, and within there it took me 3 minutes for that restore process to happen. So it's very quick in terms of giving the admin the ability to export just a small amount of data that you might want to, that would otherwise have taken you a very long time to do, because it would have to go through and go through all the content that you've backed up. In terms of the couple of other settings, so activity report, as I basically mentioned there, that was the job that I did, and it's for small points in time exports of documents that you have, and you can also see the automatic jobs that were taking place, and as I mentioned, the SharePoint backup job is taking place as we speak, which is great to show. In terms of notifications, we can provide admins and other people that might want to know the progress on how these things are going, and it's useful to know. I think if you're one of these people that's in charge of backups, then you would want to know if things are running properly and if there's any exceptions, and this is all baked into the product. In terms of backups, as John mentioned, we provide a default encryption profile. We also allow you to bring your own keys, and that's really good if you're wanting to protect your data and making sure that only your company has got access to it, then we allow that, and it's very easy to integrate that in. And we also support information rights management, which means that when you're restoring it, then it allows super users to decrypt that information. And in terms of the restore settings, we can allow multiple threads or single threads. In the storage location, we can change it to, as we mentioned, any cloud provider or FTP connection is available here as well. So it gives you that flexibility. If you did want another copy somewhere else and you were on Azure, then you could back it up to Azure Storage, which is really fast, and it means that you've got it in one place, which is then very easy to manage and govern. And I think that's really important in terms of the data that you have. It's how you're also looking after it and what you do with the backups and things afterwards. And the mapping side of things in terms of settings, as I mentioned, user mappings is really useful. If you've got people that are not in that department, so they may have moved departments, then you can map this for people that have moved, and it'll provide them the same access. And language mapping I've covered. So that's a very quick overview in terms of how the restore and backup process works within Cloud Backup. Back to you, John, and any questions there?
Sure. So to recap what we saw Yatindra going through here, let me, if you pass the ball back over, I'll share the slide there. So we had actually a few really good questions that were coming up as part of the, as the demos were going on. We did not forget about you guys. I think it makes more sense to be able to sum them up here towards the end. So when we look at what we do for Office 365 today versus what we hope to be doing in the future, today what we do is we make sure that we back up as many of the Office 365 services as Microsoft makes available to us. So what Yatindra was showing you guys was some of the key workloads that we know have gotten rolled out first. So Mark, a question for you. What were some of the first workloads that you were looking to protect in Office 365?
Well, I think our biggest thing is the SharePoint side of it. We are currently still using Exchange locally, so that part we only have several IDs that are out there. OneDrive is something we're finally starting to get people to use. In any of those situations, it's very hard to get people to actually embrace, I'll call it new technology. Obviously, SharePoint's been out for a while, but yeah, I think at this point it's SharePoint because we are now in the last, I think, 7 or 8 months now, we've been totally in the cloud, and that doesn't sound right, but anyway, yeah, we are in the cloud right now, and obviously, interesting enough, yesterday I had to do a restore, and it was the same situation. Which method do you use, and do you use time-based? Do you use the file? In this case, as we've been shown before, it was a file search, and it did give you the history. So it was very similar to what we're just showing right here. But yeah, we are SharePoint is the big thing that we're backing up at this point.
Yep. So there are two ways to think about what AvePoint does today and in the future. So we're pursuing breadth and depth. So when you look at the depth in the SharePoint piece, yes, we support communication sites. Yes, we support modern team sites. Yes, we are constantly keeping up with release of things like, for instance, in Yatindra's demo, you guys might have seen that when he was browsing the SharePoint sites, you also saw SharePoint apps included as well. And so our goal is not just to look at files, but files and everything that makes a file worthwhile to have inside of SharePoint. So there's depth that we're always going after. But breadth is also something that we pair closely with Microsoft on. So to give you an example of that, we were one of the first cloud backup vendors that supported groups in Office 365, and we did that last year. Now, there are many different flavors of groups, and so you can have a team-enabled group, you can have a Yammer-enabled group, and regardless of what type of group it is, you're going to see in the restore controller that group was registered, the mailboxes were backed up, the sites were backed up, the conversations were backed up, the calendars were backed up, the OneDrive and files and OneNotes were all backed up. What you're going to see is that there were a couple pieces that might be missing. So the first one would be the planner tasks, as well as flow and stream. Those are some of the things that we're currently working with Microsoft on to help bring out to market. Those are just adding a little depth to what is already in the product for support there. So what you would also see is if you were backing up a team, you would see protection for all of the conversations. You would see a protection for all of the channel information and the sites underneath. But there are a couple pieces that you'd be missing when you look at the restore, and that would be like the ability to put a conversation back in a Teams client or a chat back in a Teams client. We could preserve it as a record in the Teams mailbox, but those are the pieces that we're still working to close gaps on with Microsoft, and possibly by the time you rewatch this recording, we will already have announced support for that capability, because we are working very closely with Microsoft to close those gaps. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that were coming in on the chat regarding the breadth. Yatindra was able to show what most of our customers are currently using. But yes, you would find your team's information within a group, and if there are pieces that you think might not be there, part of that is because we're working to close gaps with Microsoft. But folks like Yatindra would be the ones that would help walk you through what those gaps might look like. Okay. So my advice is don't let that stop you from running a trial and to connecting it back to your Office 365 tenant, because when we do a discovery and register the content, you might actually find that information is protected. So that's a start there. So there were a couple other questions here before we move on. The first one being, we had a question come in regarding what does it look like for a user to restore their data. I thought that was a fantastic question, because today what we demoed to you is what would happen if you reached out to someone like Mark to help you do a restore.
That's right.
And so there's nothing wrong with that approach. We know that there's a lot of demand for users to be able to search and find their own content. We're looking to do that in the most secure way possible so that we don't accidentally overshare information with users, because we don't have the advantage of being able to change with the Microsoft security model the way that it would be if it was still in Office 365. So we're working really hard on that. I think we have some good solutions that we're hoping to bring to market this year. And so if you stay tuned, the idea of what it looks like to both preview the content, but then also to be able to have an end user self-service their restore, those are things that we're working on right now, and we're excited about. So if you are interested more in that, you can certainly reach out to us, and they'll probably end up connecting you with someone like me to talk you through what we're thinking on that approach. Okay. We also had another question I want to get to, which is a question of data sovereignty and where our information is located. So as you can see in this middle column here, we do believe in giving you guys ownership of the data. So we have deployed our SaaS in data centers all over the world. So in Europe in particular, you'll find us in the Netherlands and Ireland, as well as a couple other data centers that'll be coming up in the next few months, which we're excited about. If you're in the US, you'll see us in the Gov Cloud, in the commercial cloud as well. You'll find us in Japan, Australia, Singapore, all over the world. We've got data centers that are open to help keep your data in country. And so one of the things that we know that we need to work with you on is the ability to store it in a very specific region, even if we didn't open a data center there. And that's what that bring your own storage is all about. It allows you to say that regardless of where AvePoint's deployed my service, I'm going to make sure that where data resides is in my country or in my region. And so that's a real key pillar there. So if that does apply to you, as it does to some folks in the chat, that would definitely be the approach you want to take. And so the last one I kind of want to get to is, there was a good question around, how do we price and what do we look to do here? So, from a pricing perspective, there'll be contact information on the last slide, but sales@avepoint.com will get you right to the right folks. But our goal is to make this as simple as possible. So we're not going to nickel and dime for each and every source that spins up in Office 365. And so what you saw Yatindra demoing today, whether it's groups or teams or Exchange, those are all inclusive in our license there. So if you start the way Mark did on just SharePoint, you can expand over time to other resources without having to go back to the well again. So there's different models that'll help you fit, whether that's unlimited options based on all the user data that you could possibly protect. or whether it's capacity-based options where you are just looking for a small footprint and looking to right-size what your backup looks like. There are plenty of options your salespeople can walk you through. But I do want to open that question up to Mark and Yatindra. In your experience, what do you typically see as some of the hurdles to justifying the purchase of a backup option? Is there any advice you guys could be offering in terms of selling it internally to their business to help justify that price?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer first. It always is difficult for anything, especially when you're talking a cloud-based type of system. Advice on that, obviously the savings that you get by using a cloud-based system, or even system similar to this one, is an amazing amount of money. And obviously, money is the big thing that everybody looks at. So if you can just literally show the difference between what it costs to run your own system, which obviously is a lot more with the maintenance, including the initial purchase. So, I mean, I know money talks, so I think that's probably one of the big things that people should impress upon their supervisors or management people.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, I completely agree with what Mark said. And I think the way that backups and things in SaaS platforms work, such as cloud backup, is really good because you still have control over the backups while the responsibility in that may lie with AvePoint in this case. So it's great for companies because the risk is mitigated because they know that they've got a really good partnership where you can trust the people that are looking after your data, and it frees up the admins to do other things. I mean, back in the day when I was restoring site collections, and it would take a very long time, and this frees up a lot of that sort of time to give more value back to the company. Is what we usually find here.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually like that scenario. Most Office 365 teams I know of are fairly short-staffed. I don't know if you guys feel the same.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we try and take a lot of that workload off. So, given that when you do deploy cloud backup, one of the things that Yatindra was, kind of glossed over is that actually that's not the only thing that we do in our hosted products. It is certainly one of the most popular things we do, to our surprise as well. But it is one of the most popular products of a whole suite that you can deploy to help you govern and manage Office 365. So if you are interested in any of these solutions, I think we'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. Because again, once you set up that connection once to your Office 365 environment, it's possible to use any one of our management solutions to help you govern what you do in Office 365. So in terms of next steps in contact to us, there is a backup ebook that I encourage you guys to go onto our website to go read through. That provides a lot of the depth and context that we presented today that you could also use to help talk with your management teams about why protection is important to you. And if you do have questions about pricing, I would encourage you to contact sales@avepoint.com. There are sales teams globally available to you to talk through regional pricing. And just to recap for you guys, we have the right pricing model that will fit for you. We can either offer you guys unlimited backup based on how many users you've got, or if you're interested in right sizing that backup solution just for your data set, we can also do it based on the amount of content you've got in Office 365. So there are plenty of solutions and plenty of options for us to be able to present the data back to you. So if you do have any other questions or technical questions, you can also reach out to these folks. Or if you spin up a trial, remember what Yatindra showed you guys. There's a feedback button that you can click on that'll actually reach out to a product team member, much like myself, that should be able to help answer your technical questions there. So given that, I want to really thank Yatindra and Mark here for presenting with us. I think it was important to hear in practice, what is it like to actually deploy our solutions, and then also to be able to see it for yourselves. And so thank you guys for really making it possible to do that today.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. And with that, we want to welcome you guys to send any feedback you might have, and also to reach out to us for your trial information and any other details. Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thanks. Take care, guys. Bye.